Number one, for people watching me online, the reason you got this odd angle is because I give me permission to tape me. Okay, because Westmont has these ridiculous rules about people not taping people for public reasons. I am a fan of tape for the same reason I am a fan of cops wearing body cams. I think that tape allows people to understand what is and is not happening in given places. So instead of there being a bunch of varying reports made, this is reflecting on me. Okay, so first of all, thanks to Young America's Foundation for sponsoring this event. Thanks to the Young America's Foundation group here on campus for putting it together. And I have to say that the administration has made this relatively tough. This is the first event that I've had to speak at where, and I've spoken at literally dozens of schools at this point, where the administration mandated that I be introduced and also talked off. So I'm an eminently dangerous man, clearly. Here's the note from the, let's see, who is this from? The director of Campus Life, Dr. Dan Moore, that went out earlier this week for people who haven't been following. We recognize that the speaker's views on diversity have been seen as controversial. Westmont does not endorse the speaker's ideological or partisan perspectives. However, our responsibility as a college is to provide an educational environment that interacts with differing ideas and is willing to ask hard questions in pursuit of truth. The purpose of the format outlined above is to facilitate that kind of discussion and create an environment that fosters critical thinking and engagement with ideas and beliefs, even those that may be uncomfortable. Which of course requires that there be an intro and exit from a staff member here to ensure that I don't say anything too egregious without being questioned. Because it's not like I've been doing this for most of my life. This letter, by the way, was met from, let's see, this professor. Is Bruce Fisk in the crowd? Do we have Bruce Fisk here? No Bruce Fisk here. Okay, so Bruce Fisk wrote back, quote, during an election season in which inflammatory rhetoric has often been racially laden, I wonder about the wisdom of giving a platform to someone who does not seem, to me, someone with admittedly liberal leanings. First of all, you're not liberal if you want to shut down other people. You're a leftist. It says, to be helping. I must assume that you did your homework and know what you are getting, and that you regard Shapiro as a positive conservative voice in our culture. I would welcome the chance to hear from you why you think this is the case. Well, Professor Fisk, welcome to America, where it turns out people can host speakers that you don't like, speakers with whom you disagree, speakers that you may have questions about. It turns out they don't have to justify to you why they're having me, any more than you have to justify why people's dollars are being spent on presumably your class. And I do wonder if the classes at this university that are leftist are accompanied by introductions from professors, other professors, to ensure that nobody is offended. So, with those preliminaries out of the way, and thank you, by the way, all for coming and finding your way here. I hear that the administration conveniently forgot to put out signs directing people to the actual event, so that's wonderful as well. And by the way, I look forward to the administration chartering Young America's Foundation for next year, because I hear that after last year there was some hubbub about chartering the group because it was too controversial and too terrible when you had David Horowitz. This, of course, would be ideological submission and an attempt to quash ideology, so I certainly hope that the administration here will not do that with a good-hearted group of students who simply wish to present an alternative point of view. Okay, so here's what we're actually going to talk about with those preliminaries. And again, folks, if you're watching on the live stream, the waves of students that you see entering right now are being sneaked in. Because in America in 2016, you have to use the back door if you want to participate in free speech. You get to block the front door if you're a member of the left. Professor Wyde, by the way, he doesn't want to try it, apparently. He doesn't want to try this whole free speech thing. When he spotted students putting up flyers for this event, he called in the guys with the guns, the campus security, because he wouldn't want posters microaggressing you, of course. He then said that the students putting up these posters were fascists, because putting up posters, that's fascist. And then he suggested that the students were responsible for death threats he had received, and he wrote on a sign outside his office, the best response to microaggression is macroaggression. In other words, if I'm offended, I get to take physical action against you, I get to be violent with you, and that's what we're watching outside right now. For those of you who don't speak low IQ, what Professor Wyde means is that the best response to hearing things that you don't like is hurting people who say those things. I guarantee you this, I've certainly received more death threats than Professor Wyde. Some might be from people in this room, like, for example, certainly from people outside. One, Reuben Martin, who told another professor at this university, Melina Abdullah, via Facebook, and this is how it's written. And there it is, gang. Guess what? You know what? They're not going to stop us. Melina Abdullah's fan, Ruben Martin, wrote, "You want I should hoid 'em, boss. I got a few's ideas me and the fella's been kicking round. Only ting is he won't be talking or looking so nice no more. We'll take the cannolis." The reason I'm reading it in this way is because this is exactly how it's written. Hoidem is spelled Hoyt''E''M. Speaking of Professor Abdullah, she posted this on her Facebook wall earlier this week. Folks, if you're just joining the live stream, somebody pulled the fire alarm to stop this, because this is how the fascists do it. Professor Abdullah posted this on her Facebook wall, quote, "When diversity becomes a problem has been scheduled for February 25th at Cal State LA, a campus that is 90% students of color, and during Black History Month. I say this event is a problem. What we gun do, y'all?" And again, gun is spelled G-O''N. How about you could try listening? How about that instead of pulling the fire alarm or stopping people from entering? Or at the very least, why don't you start using proper grammar? You're a professor. By the way, Professor Abdullah teaches a class that fulfills a diversity requirement at this university, a requirement designed to encourage tolerance and acceptance of others. You can hear the tolerance and acceptance coming from the speakers in this room as they attempt to evacuate the premises so people don't hear my deeply scary and frightening ideas.
So unconscious bias is a concept well documented in psychological studies, which is basically that people associate negative things with people of color and positive things with whites. So if that is true, given that that is true, how does white privilege not exist?
Okay, so you're asking about unconscious bias. I apologize because it's kind of echoey, but the question was, if there is unconscious bias, just to repeat it so I'm making sure I get it right, if there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
The question is, given that there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
So number one, so when I speak about white privilege, yes, so when I speak about white privilege, I'm speaking specifically about behavior. Okay, there have been no studies, and really I've looked at these studies, the connection between what they call implicit bias, this is their favorite phrase now, implicit bias, unconscious bias, and biased behavior has yet to be proven at any level that is even remotely necessary to be used in, for example, a courtroom, which is why it's never been used in a courtroom. It is also true that there is no way, there really isn't, there's been no proven way to alleviate what they call unconscious bias, which means that we're ghost hunting. So what I would suggest is that if there is unconscious bias, and I'll acknowledge the possibility or the reality of unconscious bias, if there is, then I need you to I don't care about what's in people's heads so much as what they do. So if you point me to a racist behavior, don't worry, I'll let you respond. If you point me to a racist behavior, I'm happy to stand alongside you and protest it. What I can't do is protest about things in people's head that I don't know about because I'm not a mind reader.
Okay, so that's a really interesting response, and to that I have two questions. Firstly, what I've heard you say that this is something that, the way people think doesn't affect their behavior. So that's the first thing you've said. So I'm really curious if you can kind of give me another example of a thought that somebody has which doesn't affect their behavior. Like, do people who, support Trump not vote for him? Like, I'm very curious about that.
Yes.
And secondly, so the second thing that I want to ask is that if it's something it's hard to fix, does it mean we shouldn't do anything about it? Because you said, I don't know if we can change how people think. Does that mean we shouldn't try?
I mean, first of all, not a great impression. But beyond that, my voice isn't that low. But beyond that, as far as the first question, which is, do people have thoughts that don't manifest in behavior? Yes, all the time.
For instance?
For instance, every thought that you have about walking up here and strangling me right now. I assume we have thoughts all the time that don't manifest in behavior, and this is true every single day. We consider thoughts that cross our minds. And the problem with unconscious bias is the idea is you don't even know that you're having the thought, right? So how can you stop it if you don't even know that you're having it? But then we should be able to gauge the unconscious bias and its impact on behavior. That's why it's unconscious bias as opposed to conscious bias. The idea behind unconscious bias is that it's not even a ghost, it's a ghost of a ghost, because you don't even know you're having the thought. So people, the whole idea behind diversity training is the idea that you can retrain people to stop their chain of thoughts in order so that it doesn't manifest in behavior. I don't think that every thought manifests in behavior. If it did, then every time a man saw a good-looking woman walk down the street, a straight man saw a good-looking woman down the street, we'd have a real mess on our hands. So the second question, the idea was a little too broad for me to respond to, which is, just because something is tough, don't we have to face up to it? Yes, we have to face up to tough things all the time. And one of the tough things I would suggest that we face up to is that you have a lot more control over your own behavior and the decisions you make than the supposedly widespread unconscious bias of people you've never met.